Diabetes Connections is brought to you by the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled insulin, by Omnipod 5, the only tubeless pump that integrates with Dexcom G6, and by Dexcom. Help make knowledge your superpower with the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitoring system.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, Jisel Parra had a rocky start with diabetes. As a teen, her type 1 was initially misdiagnosed, and she struggled with support and mental health. But she found ways to find community, including making T1D a centerpiece of a pageant.
I'm going to keep wearing my pump because I'm going to find somebody that knows the struggle, and I'm going to find friends. I'm going to be able to have people that I can call in my corner and have that support that I'm looking for. But it became kind of like the all-encompassing platform of not being ashamed.
She shares how she came to really believe that platform of not being ashamed. And these days, Jisel runs a Tad 2 suite, which makes trendy medical bracelets. She's a mom, she's a wife, and she has a great career outside of diabetes. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. Always so glad to have you here. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. How can it be this late in April already? We are almost at the end of my son's senior year of high school. Benny's got a prom this week. And next week, 2 different schools, 2 different sets of friends. Oh my gosh, his summer's pretty much set. I'm going to come back after the interview and talk about what's going on with him. I mean, many of you have followed this since he was very little. Benny is now 18 and a senior in high school. I'm going to tell you about spring break and a whole bunch of other stuff. I'll do that at the end of the show. And it's not just like, oh, time flies. I want to also talk about how hybrid closed loop systems, these new AID systems, have changed our lives in ways that maybe we should have expected, but I got to tell you, I didn't think it would be this good. And it's not about perfect blood sugars. So I'll come back and talk about that a little bit later on. I met this week's guest at an event late last year. It was the Macy's Believers fundraiser, and that happened in November of last year. And we do talk about the event a little bit during the interview, which is why I'm bringing it up. I sat with Jisel's husband and her children, who were just beaming, all 3 of them. They're so proud of her. It was wonderful to watch that as she was speaking. And of course, her speech was very emotional as well. She touched on a lot of the things we're going to talk about today. Jisel's story starts off very rocky, and she doesn't shy away from talking about her mental health struggles with diabetes. But she's a very positive person, and she would tell you she's come a long way. I think you're really going to love hearing from her. All right, but first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Afrezza. And every time I mention it, I get so many messages. What is it all about? Afrezza is an ultra-rapid-acting mealtime insulin. You breathe it in using an oral inhaler. Afrezza gives you the flexibility to eat when you want while providing proven blood sugar control. Afrezza's ultra-rapid action allows you to inhale your insulin right when food arrives, even unexpectedly, so you can be spontaneous but still in control without the need for injections at mealtime. Find out more, see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium, and is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you've ever smoked, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety. Jisel, thanks so much for joining me. I'm glad you had some time to jump on.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to do this.
We've met before, but when we had a few minutes to talk at that event in November at Macy's Believers, I just thought I want to learn more about you. I mean, I spent time at the table with your husband and your adorable kids, but I really wanted to learn more about you. So thanks for doing this.
No, I appreciate it. And I know, obviously, being so involved in the diabetic community, I've seen you around, and I'm always like, this lady is plugged into everything. Like, I need to know what she, and everyone's always like, oh yeah, Stacey. And I was like, I want to know Stacey. So it's like finally the moment that it all comes full circle.
That's funny. Well, let's talk about you. You were diagnosed as a teenager, right? You were like 15?
Yeah, very odd. 15 years old.
Well, tell me about that. Like, what was that like? Because that's got to be, I remember my kids at 15. I mean, there's no good age to be diagnosed with diabetes, but 15, I think, is a really tough age all around.
Absolutely. I think complicated is the best word that I can use to describe it now. And it was very routine. I have a really just odd diagnosis story because we were going in for our school physicals for the upcoming year. It was end of summer. And I remember our pediatrician at the time goes to my mom, have the kids had blood work done. And my mom found it a little odd because she's like, why would they need blood work for a school physical? And he's like, well, just routine. If we haven't done it in a while, then, it doesn't hurt. And she's like, okay, no problem. And on my blood work results, my glucose levels were elevated. And awesome of him because it raised enough concern where he was like, that doesn't seem normal, and he started probing, like asking the probing questions like, does diabetes run in the family and all that stuff. And we didn't think anything of it. We were like, grandparents, type 2 diabetes, sure, but we didn't even know of type 1, to be honest with you. And he's like, well, I don't like the numbers. Are you okay if we do the fasting, the glucose fasting test? Had no idea what that was. I remember my mom taking me to go get the test done and sitting there for 3 hours, and she had to go run errands. So I just read a book and, every hour every hour on the hour, they, took me back and took some more blood. And then at the end, I was like, all right, I'm done. Come get me. And back to school I went. And then it was after those test results, and the doctor called us back in and he's like, I think you're diabetic. Like everything on these numbers show me that you're diabetic. But knowing what I know now, and at that time, just how my whole diagnosis and just care of, it was all by the grace of God holding me through the process, because I was very much so in the honeymoon phase and during my diagnosis, because they treated me as a type 2 diabetic in the beginning. I wasn't put on insulin immediately.
Oh, wow.
I was put on glipizide and Avandia to manage my diabetes. And I was basically just checking my sugar and eating like a crazy person because I think the glipizide was making me hungry.
Well, and let me just jump in. Did they do that knowing you had type 1 and saying it's just so early, we don't want to start insulin, or were you misdiagnosed?
I am pretty sure I was misdiagnosed, which seems like the oddest thing because there was nothing inclining for it to be a type 2 diagnosis for me.
Yeah, especially at 15.
Right. Exactly. Knowing what I know now. At the time, I had no clue.
Sure.
And in my environment, my dad, just a little bit of background. I was born in Puerto Rico. My mom's Puerto Rican. My dad, we moved here. We live in Orlando, Florida. I've lived here my whole entire life. My dad always worked. My mom still to this day doesn't really have exact power over the English language. She still, speaks Spanish, and that's her first language. My dad, bilingual, fine, no worries. But the person taking me all these appointments was my mom. So the person navigating all these conversations was me and translating it to her and me trying to understand it. So I don't know what I was doing. I was like, okay, so I have to do that. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, I'll do this for a couple months and then I'll get better and I'll be fine. So it really didn't dawn on me. And I was basically misdiagnosed that way for a year. And it wasn't until I just start feeling worse and worse. And finally, my primary at that time, we have changed. She was like, are you with an endocrinologist? I was like, I have no idea what that is. And she's like, you need to see an endocrinologist. And sure enough, I remember I went to my endocrinologist, the very first one I visited, and it was just like the look of shock on her face. I felt so uncomfortable because I was like, what am I doing wrong? I had no idea. And she's like, why aren't you on insulin? I was like, I don't know. What is insulin?
How am I supposed to know? I'm 15. I'm 16.
It was such a frustrating and crazy experience. And that's why I say I was like, it's just grace held on to me just for this whole year. Because how was I not in the hospital? I still don't understand.
That's amazing. Did your endocrinologist ultimately support you? And did you find a good course of treatment after that?
Oh, absolutely. She changed the whole trajectory for me. She did a 180. She's like, you need to be on insulin. You need to be on fast-acting insulin. Let's get you someone that's going to train you up on how to use it and how it works. She's like, I want you on an insulin pump, but you need to learn how to manage it yourself through MDI in the beginning. And then at the time, CGM wasn't like this big thing that it is now. So that wasn't part of the conversation.
Sure.
But definitely the goal was to get me on the pump within the 6-month range of getting my A1C, like getting myself into a flow of dosing insulin that I had not, was completely just foreign to me.
Do you remember when you started feeling better after using insulin?
So it was wild because I think that I just associated the busyness of just everything with that's like the normal, the feeling fatigued and the dryness, you know, in my mouth. And I don't remember the constant urination. That really wasn't something, but it wasn't anything that was too long. I never felt horrible. I don't ever recall feeling like, oh my God, like something's wrong.
Yeah.
But yes, I do remember just feeling more alert, lighter, like schoolwork. I was like, oh, I can pay attention. Like I'm not feeling like I'm dragging all the time. I'm like, wow. I'm like, this is great. I was like, oh, okay. This is what I'm supposed to feel like.
Wow. That's amazing.
Now as a mom, it's totally different. I'm like, wait, I just went right back 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, it's funny that you say that, because when I got really sick. I don't have diabetes. I have a different autoimmune condition. I got really sick when I was about 41, and I chalked it up for weeks. I'm just tired. I'm a mom. I don't know why when you said that, it just made me flash back to that, but we do make all these excuses for ourselves.
It's true. It's a little scary because we don't give ourselves the opportunity to really dig into things because we just assume it's just the surface stuff.
Yeah. So tell me about that. You're diagnosed as a teenager. You have this crazy first year. We already zipped ahead. You have 2 kids. So you seem to be doing okay.
You know, life is great. And I always kind of reference, you know, we're all dealt a hand of cards, right? And it's, you know, attitude is a big part of it. And I'm not going to say that I always have the best attitude because I would be just lying straight out. But you know, there's choices that we have to make. And, you know, I've struggled. You know, mental health has been a huge thing for me. And surprisingly enough, it didn't really start affecting me until I was in my 30s. I was diagnosed when I was 15. So 15 years, I was just strolling through life like, okay, I've got diabetes. I've got it. My whole response to everything was like, I can do it. I can do it. There was like, yes, 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 yes. Not realizing that I was pouring from an empty cup for so many years because I wasn't raised in a family where we talked about those kind of things, like your feelings, your emotions, like, you know, can you handle this? It was like we just did, you know, we just did. And you didn't have time to unload per se. And it was of nobody's fault. My parents are fantastic. I'm so close to my parents and my family, my brothers and sisters, but you don't know what you don't know, you know? And it wasn't until my 30s that whole new, you know, the floodgates of, oh, now I have to deal with all this pent up stuff that I never dealt with now in my 30s. This is when it's decided to spill over.
Well, I jumped around and we'll come back to that. But I did want to ask you, in doing research for this episode, I found some great photos of you and Sarah Sanderson, Miss Idaho, who became, you know, who walked in the Miss America pageant wearing her insulin pump. You were Miss Orange County, USA. Tell me about that experience because, you know, here you are. You just said, you know, you went through this crazy time. You really tumultuous learning how to do all this. Not only do you look great, which I know doesn't tell the whole story, but you're really advocating for diabetes as well. Talk to me about that experience. Right back to Jisel in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Omnipod 5. And you know, when you're deciding on a brand of insulin pump, there are a lot of things to think about, especially if you've never used a pump before. It can seem overwhelming. There are a lot of choices and you want to make the right decision. And that's why I'm so excited to tell you about Omnipod 5. If you're curious about trying an insulin pump or seeing what life with tubes is all about, unlike traditional tubed pumps, you can try Omnipod without being locked into a 4-year contract. You might even be eligible for a free trial. Go to diabetes-connections.com, click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety, risk information, and free trial terms and conditions, also visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Now back to Jisel, and she's talking about advocating for diabetes during her pageant experience.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. I tried, you know, I really struggled with, I had no one that I could relate to that also had type 1 diabetes. I really felt like the last standing person in school and just kind of any environment that I entered. So I finally in college, I took a little break. I was like, I really don't know what I want to do with my life. You know, this whole like, oh, what's my purpose? So I was like, I'm going to take a break. And then I remember sitting down and I was watching, we're Spanish. We watch a lot of pageants and we're like, oh yeah, you know, my mom's like, oh, you know, her like, you know, dream of being up on stage. And I was extremely like town boy. Like, I'm just like, hey, sneakers and a ponytail. Give me that t-shirt and jeans. Like, that was my makeup. What is that? I did not even enter that world. It didn't even enter my mind. I was like, could care less. And my mom was like, it'd be nice to be able to see you do something like that. And I was like, why? And she's like, it'd be nice. It'd be nice to see you, that'd be cool to see you do something like that. And I was, and she, I don't think you'd do that. And I'm like, well, why not? And it kind of was like a challenge, like, I don't know. And I was like, a month later, I was signed up for my very first pageant, and I struggled with my pump because I was on my pump at that time already. And I was like, what do I do with this? Should I wear it? Should I, clip it on, onto my swimsuit? Should I try to hide it in my back? And I was like, Jisel, you've always struggled with not fitting in. Maybe this is how you can start a conversation and fit in. And I had known that others had already done this before me, but I was like, I'm just trying to find people in my own community, people that I can actually, call and meet up with to go to the movies or whatever, that knows my struggle, and we could talk about it firsthand. So it kind of started there. So I started with a really small pageant. And funny story, I had a really bad low episode and was disqualified because the lady was so mad that I was like not functioning properly to like get on stage. So she's like, yeah, you're disqualified. You cannot do the final. And I was like, okay, fine. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to another organization. And I did it again. And this time I always got a little smarter. I was like, listen, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I might need to like take a little break and eat something, but this is my insulin pump. I'm going to wear it on stage. And I just learned to advocate for myself and to speak up. And it became something where I became a little less afraid each time that I did it. And I found that the conversations were actually more welcoming than judgmental. Granted, it's catty sometimes. It's very catty in that environment. But you also find that women do, support one another, and people are curious and they want to know. And I started at a really small county kind of pageant. And then from there, I competed at Miss Florida USA. And when I won Orlando, it was my second time going back and competing for Florida USA. The first time I competed, I placed top 15.
Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. Yeah. It actually broke me out of my shell. I was extremely timid. Doing this would feel like I was having 50 panic attacks at the same time back then. But it really, I think it kind of unraveled for me, just like, I love meeting people. I love talking to people. I love sharing stories with people. And I don't think I would have had the confidence to do it before. And I think this just kind of was like that push that I needed, like stand on your own 2 feet. You're just as capable and able, show them what you got.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Did you show your devices? Like you said, CGM really wasn't as common as it is now, but was anything visible?
Yes. It was just me and my mom. She was like, Jisel, you don't know any. I'm like, yep, let's go, Mom. And I went there and I wore my little black swimsuit, and I'm wearing my, I think, Medtronic pump at the time there. And it just so happened that one of the judges was part of the board for ADA in that county. And I think his daughter was diabetic. And I think, honestly, it swayed the votes in my direction after he was like, oh, that's so cool. And that was my very first, I got thrown into that world. I was like, okay, I won that title. And from there, I was going that summer to South Florida to compete at Miss Florida USA. It's basically all the different counties in one spot during a weekend or, a week you're there competing, and then the shows, at the very end. And I had no idea, but my whole thing, I'm going to keep wearing my pump because I'm going to find somebody that knows the struggle, and I'm going to find friends. I'm going to be able to have people that I can call in my corner and have that support that I'm looking for. But it became kind of like the all-encompassing platform of not being ashamed. And I didn't realize at the time when I was doing that, I was very much so doing it for myself because I needed that at the time. But I didn't realize how much it would leak into just everything in the future that I would be involved in.
Well, tell me then about A Tad Too Sweet. Why did you start that?
I'll never forget this. A Tad Too Sweet didn't come about till end of 2015. So at this point in my life, Valentina's born. She was born in April. Mm-hmm. And this is now, I would say, September, October-ish timeframe. And I'm sitting in bed, and the idea of I want a bracelet, like a type 1 diabetes bracelet came about. And my husband's like, okay, go online and see if you find one you like and, order one. And I was like, okay. So I'm looking and I'm like, I found a couple, but I'm like, well, that's way out of my price range. And then I'm looking for the other ones. I'm like, nah, I don't really like that style. And then as a joke, my husband goes, well, you're kind of creative. Why don't you just make something that you like and you can wear it? And that way, if it breaks or something, then it's not so terrible, especially if you want to wear it out and about it's a daily use, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's not a bad idea. And then it became this whole entire thing, Stacey, because my dad works for the airlines, and my dad is very supportive, and I was like, Dad, I kind of want to start like my own, company. And I was like, this is a great way for me to really get plugged into the community, because I can actually face-to-face talk to people that have diabetes or affected by it. And when I started, it was both for type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Like, I did bracelets for both. And my dad's like, okay, great. He's like, we need to go source supplies, because I would buy I'd buy all the separate pieces, and then I myself by hand make all the bracelets. So we flew out to look for supplies from vendors, because it would be more affordable than trying to have it shipped, in large volume. And I'm learning all this, and I'm like, the cost of this and the cost of that.
Yeah.
And I remember that, like, all I can think of is I'm sourcing supplies, and I'm like, I need to make it back for Valentina's first Halloween. And I made it back on the 31st with all of these supplies in hand. And I'm looking for like stainless steel. So like people, if they have allergies to sterling silver, like I'm thinking of all these things, and I'm just trying to do the best that I can and try to stay and create a bracelet that's on trend with what's currently popular, so that it would be, more inviting for people to want to wear it, because that's what's trending right now, and so on and so forth. And I spent October sourcing, creating my LLC, and just kind of doing those things on the side from being a mom and working. And then November, I made my first batch of bracelets. And then that very first week of December, we went to our very first show at the Orlando Convention Center. And it was, I'll never forget this, it was Take Control of Your Diabetes. That was the name of the conference. I had no idea who this organization was, but I just Googled what events are around me, and I signed up and I went. And we sold out of all the bracelets. Me and my husband went, and we set up a table, and my parents came by with my daughter later on in the day. And I was really uncomfortable, because I didn't know what reaction we were going to get. And I was just trying to honestly, like, my husband's like, you're not even trying to sell the bracelets. You're just asking people their diagnosis story. I'm like, yeah, I think this is what I've always wanted.
This is what we talk about.
The bracelet. He's like, why are we here? We could have just attended. And I'm like, yeah, but I felt like I needed a purpose for people to come up and talk to me. So it kind of took off from there. And I just always kept plugging myself in and looking for different organizations and just trying to attend all the events locally that I can, and, with time permitting and the schedule. And it's kind of flourished into what it is, I guess, today. I mean, it's nothing. I mean, I'm proud of it, but I don't know if it's like a magnitude that people would recognize or anything like that. But it's crazy to think of where it started and the story behind it.
Oh,
I think it's cool.
And this is not a reflection of anything, but do you do this full time? Do you have another job?
I do. I work full time. I work in the defense industry. I work in business development. I do finance and budget planning and trade shows and all that kind of jazz behind the scenes for one of our local defense companies here in Orlando.
So you work full time. You have this business on the side. You have 2 kids.
Yeah.
You have a husband who could not be more proud of you. I sat with him, and he was beaming the whole time you were talking at Macy's Believers at the event in November. You have these 2 kids who are just super busy. I know that age. How do you manage diabetes in all of that? Do you have to really find time to make yourself kind of think it through? Is it just part of the routine? Is it in the background? It's
a work in progress every day. If I'm going to be raw and honest with you, and I think that I try to stay pretty active on Instagram, on my social media platforms, and you always show like, the great moments, as we all know, but I still struggle. There's days that I get really, really aggravated when, my diabetes isn't cooperating, and I have to get the kids to soccer, and I'm low and I can't drive, and I feel like I can't pull my weight. And those are very raw moments for me, because I feel like I'm being robbed of my ability. But those are also the moments where I can show myself years of experience on living with this disease, and just the strengthening of the muscles in my brain to just get yourself out of that mental space that you're in. Like, you are able, you are capable. This moment right now is temporary. You know how to fix it. You have the tools on your side to be able to get out of this low or this high or whatever is aggravating you at the moment. And it's a lot, though, because as you know, it's constant. It's every day. You don't get a break from it. And I think that over time, it just chips away at you, just the not being able to just like, oh my, I don't have to worry about it. I would love to just not have to worry about it some days. But if I'm being honest, I assess the day as each day comes and I try to make the best of it. And I've learned as a mom, as you know, even on the days that you aren't feeling your best, you put on an act because kids need you. And there really isn't a choice to not be present and not follow through. And in my case, I feel extremely blessed and grateful that I have a husband that supports me the way he does, because I feel like that's also a pivotal thing in my life that allows me to do as much as I'm able to do and to scale back on days where I just can't and I need to scale back. And I'm just like, hey, I'm tapping out this afternoon. Can you take it? And he's always on board to be like, yeah, I've got it. You're good. And I think that also alleviates a lot of the stress for me too.
Yeah. Was there anything, a moment, a person that helped you get to that kind of mindset? Because I think that's hard for many of us, and I'll put myself in that category too, to just say, okay, I'm going to do this day by day. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to be kind to myself in the moment.
Yeah.
How do you get there?
Stacey, you're going to make me emotional. I don't know why I always get emotional about this, but I think I always try to, I don't know if it's fair to say this, but I always try to lessen my scenario to other things that are going on in this world that I necessarily can't relate to. But I think the person that keeps me so central is my dad. I remember, and I know, and as a parent, I think I understand this on a deeper level now, just because I share those feelings. But now I know that at diagnosis, he carried that diagnosis, and he's carried that diagnosis with me. And at the time, I didn't realize that because I'm 15, I'm a kid. I'm like, oh my gosh, my life is over. This is so weird. I have to wear this. I have to do this. Like, no one's ever going to like me. I already feel awkward as it is at 15 in high school. But my dad was carrying a different weight on his heart. And through the years, my dad has always, and that's why I'm so grateful I found a man that mimics my father in that way, because I know that my heart needs that. But my dad's always been the person that when I'm down, he does it in this tough love kind of way. But he's like, you've got it. I've got you. You can do this. You are capable. You're going to get out of this. Everything's fine. Like, he always is the person that can pull back the curtain and say, look what's in front of you. Look what your options are.
I love that. Yeah.
It's always been, and I think back, I'm 34 now. My parents are getting older and I'm just like, I need my cheerleader. I'm like, like, how am I supposed to do life without my cheerleader? And it's a big thing to have that, because I realize that, especially in the last 4 or 5 years when I've gone through a lot in that, and in the mental health environment, I wouldn't have been able to dig myself out as quickly if I wouldn't have been able to go back in my mind and in my heart and just remember those times that my dad cradled my face as I was crying and at my worst and said, just let it out, but you're going to be fine. And to have those memories of those raw moments, and just to know that I had the comfort of someone that no matter what was going to see me through it or help me see through it, I think was what was giving me strength to just be like, okay, this is today. This is not necessarily what tomorrow's going to look like. Let's just get through today. I hope I answered your question, because I went off on a tangent.
No, it was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
So let's go from your dad to your kids. How do they react to your diabetes? They're old enough now. Do they help take care of you? Do they know when mom needs juice?
Yeah, it's cute now. It's funny because now Lorenzo's a lot more aware. Val, she knows my alarms now on my Dexcom. So she'll come running over with like little starbursts and stuff like that. And she's like, Mommy, are you low? And I'm just like, no, I'm okay. I took something. It'll start coming back up. And she's like, okay, Mommy. And Lorenzo now, he points and pokes at my Dexcom and he's like, diabetes. And I was like, yep, that's right, son. And he's like, but I don't know if it's going to go a little dark again. He asked me, he's like, are you going to die? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't ready for this conversation today. Like, I haven't even, like, I'm only half a cup in my coffee. And I'm like, I'm like, how do I, let me walk through this now. And, it's a conversation that I don't really wish to have with him at 5. But if he's asking, I'm a very big proponent of just honesty and just being very black and white on things. And, I'm like, yeah, one day, but not necessarily because of my diabetes. I'm like, Mommy's healthy. Mommy takes care of it. Mommy's responsible. And Mommy's here to take care of you. So you don't have to worry about that. But I do. I've had my conversations with my daughter that if I am in responsive state, she knows how to dial 911 and what to do and so on and so forth. Those are all also conversations that we've had. And it broke my heart the first time I did it with her, but I'm so glad that I did. And I do find that they're so empathetic to people. And I think that's the best kind of outcome from this.
So bringing it back to the business, where can people find you?
Oh, so my Instagram, a tad too sweet. So you can find me on there. I'm really active. We have a Facebook page. And then from there, you can, log on to our website and stuff. So it's all interconnected. I do plan on being at several events. I'm local to Orlando, Florida. So, I don't travel out too often. But, with the family and the kids, I incorporate them in whatever we go out and do. So we do have a couple events lined up in 2023, and I typically announce where we're going to be at, kind of like a pop-up shop. I love meeting people. So if anybody is planning on coming out to an event, please stop by and say hi, because it would bring me so much joy.
Well, Jisel, thank you so much for joining me. I loved this conversation. It was so much fun to catch up with you. And I hope I wasn't too nosy. You shared so much. I appreciate it very much.
No, thank you, Stacey. I appreciate you providing this platform for everyone to come on and do this kind of stuff. I think it's so great. And this is how we all stay connected and together. So thank you.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information about Jisel and A Tad Too Sweet over at diabetes-connections.com. If you're trying to find information on any of our past episodes, and we're past 550 now, holy cow, just go to the search box on the upper right-hand side, put in any keyword that you want, and you will find all of our episodes. You can also search by month. You can search by topic. Let me know what you think about the search if you're newer especially. I'm trying to make it easy for people to find the information that they're looking for without having to sift through 8 years of podcast episodes. Up next, I want to tell you about spring break and Benny. I want to talk about what happened with diabetes a little bit there. All right, but first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And I can kind of start telling the story here because Benny went to Myrtle Beach. We live in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, a very popular vacation spot to go for folks around here. And he went without us. Bunch of high school friends, parents, but not us. And I just knew what was going on because I could look at share and follow. And it seems very routine now, but it is amazing to think about how much our diabetes management has changed with share and follow. Many of you have had diabetes for many years or have had children who've had diabetes for many years. And you think back to how it was before. Benny got share and follow in 5th grade. And it's really helped us talk less about diabetes, which I never thought would happen, especially with a teenager. And Benny loves that part too, of course. And that's what's so great about the Dexcom system. I think for the caregiver or the spouse or the friend, you can help the person with diabetes manage in the way that works for your individual situation. Internet connectivity is required to access Dexcom Follow. Separate Follow app required. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. I feel like we're rounding the bases toward home. We're not quite in the home stretch, but we're getting there of Benny's senior year of high school. I have a daughter who is also graduating college, so there's a lot that's going on in my house right now. Actually, you know what? There's not a lot going on in my house right now because nobody's ever home. These kids, my daughter's away at school and Benny's always busy, but I guess I could say there's a lot going on in my head. There's a lot of planning happening, and there's a lot of thoughts via me, and there's a lot of thoughts that I'm having for the future. And some of that really bubbled up when Benny went on spring break. As I just mentioned, he was in Myrtle Beach for almost a week with friends, and we're at the point now where we got to go over the plan, and he rolls his eyes and laughs at me because the plan is always the same. I'm only going to call if there's an extreme low or an extreme high. And I mean, by extreme, I mean under 50 at this point or over 300, 350 for a long period of time. I'm only going to text him or call him if I'm worried that he's not addressing the situation. If you've read my books, we did not start out like that. Benny was diagnosed at 2. It's taken us a long time to get to where we are now, where I am basically hands off. He wouldn't mind me telling you I only had to text him once about diabetes. My Dexcom high alerts are off. That took me a long time to get to as well. But of course I look and I noticed that he was above 350 for about 2 hours. And I just texted him and said, you're on that high, right? And he texted me back, I love Benny. Oh, I forgot to bolus for dinner and we eat all this food. And then my infusion set was leaking and then I had to change it all out. He's like, I'm going to be high for a while, but I've taken care of it. We're at the point now where there's really nothing else for me to say. He knows how to troubleshoot. He knows that mistakes are going to happen, and so do I, and we've accepted that. All I really care about for a trip like this is that he knows how to stay safe. And that's where these AID systems come in. We use Control IQ, as you know. I talk about Omnipod 5. They're a sponsor of the show. I love them too. Yay, Medtronic. I'm very happy with these automated insulin delivery systems. Choice is great. I say it, I mean it. But man, these automated systems, I used to think that it would kind of change the way we used a temp basal. I was thinking about it kind of narrowly. I want to give him less insulin when he's playing sports. And I want to give him more when we have a high fat, high carb, high protein meal. And we use extended boluses and temp basals and things like that. And I kind of thought an AID system would lessen that load. I'm not sure I really understood how much it would help me worry less about his safety, long-term and short-term. Because it really, I sound like I'm doing another commercial here, but these systems work so hard to keep people with diabetes in a safer range. I guarantee years ago without this kind of system, many more highs, lots of lows. How do I know? Because I saw it on the big field trip in 5th grade. I saw it on his 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C. It did not occur to me that my 18-year-old managing completely independently with an AID system would do a better job than adults watching over a 5th grader or an 8th grader and helping them along. We as humans are generally, I know some of you would disagree, but are generally not as good as these systems can be. And I'm so grateful for them. I am not grateful that time is flying and my kid's about to go to college, but we'll get there. We'll get there. All right. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. Hey, next week, talking to the first commercial pilot with type 1 diabetes. This was such a great conversation. I've been meaning to talk to Pietro Marsala for a very long time. The last time he was scheduled to come on the show, he lost his voice, so we had to reschedule. I'm glad we waited because some stuff changed for him recently. It's fabulous, and you'll hear about it next week. Until then, I'm Stacey Sims. Be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.